This happened back in 2019 when I was working the night shift at a 24-hour storage facility in Michigan. I was 22 years old, fresh out of college, and desperately needed a job that would pay my student loans. The position seemed perfect at first. Decent pay, quiet environment, and all I had to do was monitor security cameras and make sure nobody broke into the units overnight. What they didn't tell me during the interview was that I'd be completely alone for 8 hours straight in a building that felt like a maze. The storage facility was massive, 3 stories tall with over 400 units spread across multiple wings and corridors. During the day, it buzzed with activity. People loading moving trucks, families sorting through old belongings, small business owners accessing their inventory. But at night, the place transformed into something entirely different. The fluorescent lights would flicker randomly, casting eerie shadows down the endless hallways. Every small sound seemed amplified in the silence. Footsteps echoed strangely, and doors would creak even when there was no wind. My first few weeks went smoothly enough. I'd arrive at 10 p.m., get briefed by the evening supervisor, and settle into the security office with my coffee and Netflix. The office was located on the 2nd floor, right in the center of the building. It had windows facing 3 different corridors and a bank of monitors showing feeds from security cameras positioned throughout the facility. The setup was pretty standard for a place like this. Around my 3rd week on the job, I started noticing small irregularities. Nothing major at first, just things that seemed slightly off. A unit door that I could swear was closed would be slightly ajar when I made my rounds. Boxes in the main lobby would be rearranged between my hourly walks. The thermostat would be adjusted, even though I was the only person with access to it. I mentioned these things to my supervisor, but he just shrugged and said, "Old buildings settle weird," and maybe I was remembering things incorrectly. The first real sign that something was seriously wrong came on a Tuesday night in late October. I was reviewing camera footage from earlier in the day when I noticed movement on one of the monitors. It was the feed from the 3rd floor, East Wing. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, but then I saw it again. A shadow moving across the hallway, but there was no corresponding person visible in the frame. I rewound the footage and watched it 3 more times. Same thing every time. A distinct shadow moving from left to right, but nothing casting it. I immediately grabbed my flashlight and headed upstairs to investigate. The 3rd floor was always the creepiest part of the building. Fewer lights, narrower hallways, and a strange, musty smell that the maintenance crew could never quite eliminate. As I walked down the East Wing corridor checking each unit door, everything seemed normal. No signs of forced entry, no unusual sounds, nothing out of place. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. That's when I heard it for the first time. A soft, scraping sound coming from somewhere above my head, like someone dragging something heavy across a metal surface. I stopped walking and listened intently. The sound continued for maybe 10 seconds, then stopped abruptly. I looked up at the ceiling, but all I could see were the standard drop tiles and air conditioning vents. The facility had an extensive ventilation system running throughout all 3 floors, with large rectangular ducts connecting every section of the building. I reported the incident the next morning, but again, my supervisor seemed unconcerned. He suggested it might be a squirrel or raccoon that had gotten into the vents from outside. That explanation made sense, I guess, but something about the sound didn't seem right for an animal. It was too rhythmic, too deliberate. Over the next few nights, the scraping sounds became more frequent and more distinct. They would start around midnight and continue intermittently until about 3 a.m., always coming from directly above whatever hallway I happened to be walking down. I started timing the sounds, trying to map their location throughout the building. What I discovered made my blood run cold. The sounds were following me. Whenever I moved from one section of the facility to another, the scraping would stop in my previous location and begin again above my new position. It was as if someone was crawling through the ventilation system, tracking my movements from inside the walls. But that seemed impossible. The vents were standard commercial size, barely large enough for maintenance access, certainly not big enough for a person to move through comfortably. I started avoiding certain areas of the building during my rounds, but the sounds would always find me eventually. The breaking point came on a Friday night in early November. I was doing my usual 2 a.m. security check when I heard something that made me question my sanity. Not just the scraping this time, but what sounded distinctly like whispering. Muffled voices coming from inside the walls, too quiet to make out words but loud enough to know they were human. I pressed my ear against the wall near one of the larger vents and held my breath. The whispers stopped immediately, like whoever was up there knew I was listening. I called my supervisor's emergency line, hands shaking as I dialed. When he answered, groggy and irritated, I tried to explain what was happening. He cut me off halfway through, saying he'd review the camera footage in the morning and that I should focus on doing my job instead of chasing ghost stories. The dismissal in his voice was clear. I was on my own. That's when I decided to take matters into my own hands. The next night, I brought a small digital recorder and a telescoping mirror from my car. If someone was really living in those vents, I was going to prove it. Around 11 p.m., I positioned myself in the third-floor east wing corridor where the sounds were most frequent. I set the recorder on the floor directly beneath the largest air vent and waited. Midnight came and went with nothing but silence. Then, at 12:47 a.m. exactly, I heard it. The unmistakable sound of fabric brushing against metal, followed by what I can only describe as controlled breathing. Someone was definitely up there, trying to move as quietly as possible but failing to account for the acoustic properties of the ductwork. I held up the telescoping mirror, angling it to catch a reflection inside the vent opening. What I saw in that tiny mirror changed everything. A human eye, wide and bloodshot, staring directly back at me from inside the darkness of the vent. We locked eyes for maybe 3 seconds before the eye disappeared, followed by the sound of rapid movement deeper into the ventilation system. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst. I grabbed my phone and called 911, abandoning any concern about what my supervisor might think. The dispatcher sent 2 patrol officers who arrived within 15 minutes. I met them at the front entrance and explained the situation as calmly as I could manage. To their credit, they took my report seriously and agreed to investigate the building with me. Officer Martinez, a veteran cop with kind eyes, asked to see the exact location where I'd spotted the intruder. We climbed to the 3rd floor, and I showed him the vent opening above where I'd been standing. He examined it with his flashlight and immediately noticed something I'd missed in my panic. Fresh scratches around the vent cover screws and what appeared to be fabric fibers caught on the metal edges. The investigation revealed a homeless man had been living in our ventilation system for over 2 months, accessing the building through a damaged roof vent and surviving on items stolen from customer units. He was arrested without incident, but the experience haunts me to this day. Sometimes, late at night, I still catch myself listening for sounds in the walls, wondering what else might be hiding in the spaces we never think to check.